Okay, this is E2 Engineering Economics. If you want more info, any introductory chapter of an engineering economics textbook would be great. So Chan Park has a book that I like quite a bit, Fundamentals of Engineering Economics. I think he has another one too. And then also this Noonan, Eschenbach and Lavelle book from Oxford University Press is really good as well. So just check that out if you want more information, and also take a look at the E2 summary notes, Principles of Engineering Economics. Okay, definitionally, engineering economics involves developing methods that permit the inclusion of economic and financial considerations into engineering decision making. It's all very well to come up with a beautiful solution to a problem, but what if it's super expensive? So we try to incorporate these ideas up front. If you recall from the video E1, we said that engineers are most involved in that component of the economic decision of how to produce. And so for an economist, we sometimes say that that's the same thing as saying as the choice of technology. And for an economist, and I don't know, maybe that's also true for engineers, but a technology for an economist is a method of production. It's not a thing like a computer. So a lot of people who haven't studied economics before think, well, when you say technology, you actually mean some physical item. It's a method of production. It's like, suppose you have a recipe book for making a particular good. You may have several different recipes and you have to choose the best one. And so, for example, economists sometimes talk about something called disembodied technological change, which means I don't buy anything new, but I rearrange the physical capital I already have. I rearrange my machines, or I find a way to do something different. And that is also considered technological change for economists. And so for economists, if I draw a very simple production function, Q for economists usually stands for quantity produced. So Q is the output. And it's functionally related to the level of capital, let's say physical capital, used in the production process. And L is the amount of labor used. So this is a very simple implicit production function. So we say the more capital you have, the more output you can have, the more labor you have, the more output you can have. But also implicit in this is the idea that you could choose different mixes of capital and labor. I would say one of the most important things with the engineering economics textbooks is they tend to gloss over this. And I do like to mention this because actually my brother's a railway engineer, and he trained at Leeds University in England, but he's worked mainly in Asia. So when you learn your recipe of how to make a railway in England with a certain level of labor costs relative to capital costs, those decisions are going to be a lot different if you move to a country like China, where the labor is cheap and the capital is expensive. And so sometimes I just want you to be aware of this, because not everyone is going to practice their trade, ply their trade in the United States, and most of these books sort of ignore this idea. But so, for example, labor-rich countries, so countries that have a lot of labor relative to capital, tend to have cheap labor, low wages. And when you see them making a good, like say a road, a mile of road, they tend to select labor-intensive techniques. And then, of course, the opposite is true of capital-rich countries, which have cheap capital, and so they tend to select capital-intensive techniques to do the same thing. So there's more than one way to make a road. So just have that out there, because I notice the engineering technology books tend not to mention that, and I think it's really important if you're not actually going to be practicing your engineering in the United States. So that's one thing. So engineers are involved with deciding how to produce, so selecting the technology. And then the other really important thing about engineering economics, I guess, is, so if this is sort of important thing one, how are we going to select the technology? Important thing two is that most decisions are made at the margin. And that's called marginal analysis, and that's a key insight. It's usually a question of a little more or a little less. You know, shall we produce a few more cars rather than should we produce cars at all? I mean, sometimes you make those total decisions, but a lot of decisions you make are a little more or a little less of something. And then the final really key insight of engineering economics, I guess, is that there's a time value to money. So the time value of money relates to the fact that $1 today is not worth the same as $1 in a year. And we can easily prove that. We can just imagine someone offering us $1 today and $1 in a year, and which one we would prefer. And the thing about engineering, of course, is a lot of projects you have upfront costs, and then you have a stream of future benefits. And so the costs and benefits play out over a very long time period, maybe decades. And so what we have to do is come up with a very clever technique of discounting. Usually we discount the future costs and benefits, and we try and get all the costs and benefits into one time period so that we can accurately compare them. I guess there's one more thing that I mentioned in the book, and I did it in the context of how much does a particular government have to pay to borrow money from the private sector. So that would be, if you're the Greeks, as I think I've got the Greek interest rate on a 10-year bond contrasted with the US rate on 10-year bond. If you're the Greeks, you have to pay a premium. If you're the Brazilians, you have to pay a premium because it's more risky to lend money to the Portuguese government or the Greek government or the Brazilian government than it is to lend money to the Germans or the United States. So risk requires reward, and I'm sure you're quite familiar with that in other areas of your life. And then the last thing I would say is that I want you to look at the summary notes because they're especially useful for answering the quiz questions. And as I said, we're just getting warmed up this week, but things get a little faster, but I think they're always manageable. And so I guess I'll see you in the next video.